Hello everybody and welcome to the Comics Alliance Top 5. My name is Chris Sims and this week we're going to be talking about the scariest villains in superhero comics. Now obviously villains are meant to be frightening, but it's very rare that they actually are. Usually you know that the hero is going to beat them up and send them off to jail or an asylum or their home dimension or whatever. But occasionally you get those villains that are actually genuinely scary. That's what we're talking about today. Coming in at number 5, we have the Joker. That might seem like a pretty low ranking for one of the most popular villains in comics, but he's kind of a victim of his own popularity. He's shown up so much and been defeated so many times that it's kind of hard to take him seriously as a really frightening villain. When he's done right though, like he is in Soft Targets from Gotham Central or during Grant Morrison's run on Batman, he's terrifying. He's one of the scariest villains out there because you know that he's going to do something truly terrible. Who would have thought that a clown who kills people would be that scary? I know, I was surprised too. At number 4, we have the Crooked Man, from the Hellboy story of the same name by Mike Mignola and Richard Corbin. Now, Hellboy stories are great at setting a creepy mood and a creepy tone, but they're very rarely actually scary for the simple reason that, well, they have Hellboy in them. And Hellboy's entire deal is that he punches monsters in the face and sends them back to hell. The Crooked Man, though, is a little different. Yes, he gets punched out, or in his case, beaten with a shovel. But there are 3 issues of this guy being creepy, and a lot of that comes down to Richard Corbin's amazing design. He's twisted and broken, and the way people talk about him makes him sound like a truly horrifying creature, long before he actually shows up in the story. And by the time he does, you're already prepared to be terrified, especially when he starts throwing corpses around. Coming in at number 3, we have James Gordon Jr. Now, I tried not to have too many Batman villains on this list. Fortunately for me, the Scarecrow isn't actually all that scary, despite that being his entire deal, so that part was easy at least. But Jim Gordon Jr., really, really creepy. Even by Gotham City standards, and that's saying something. When he shows up in Scott Snyder and Francesco Francavilla's issues of Detective Comics, it's some of the weirdest and most unsettling Batman stories I've ever read, and I've read about all of them. Very few of them have the feeling that this story does. There's just something very wrong with Jim Gordon Jr., and that he can be that evil and that affecting coming from a family that we only know as being full of heroic good guys. It creates a contrast that makes him seem even scarier. At number 2, we have the Corinthian, created by Neil Gaiman and Mike Dringenberg in the pages of The Sandman. When I asked people on Twitter to name a comic book villain that they were actually afraid of, the Corinthian was named more than anyone else, and for good reason. I have a teeth thing, I have an eye thing. Corinthian does both of those at the same time. Now it should be noted that a lot of people also mention Dr. Destiny from The Sandman, but that guy has a long career of being used as a punching bag by the Justice League, so I kind of disqualified him on that front. The Corinthian, however, has no such history. He shows up as a tooth-eyed serial killer in one of the best stories of that run, and is immediately terrifying. The reveal when he takes off his glasses is amazing and creepy and unsettling. And it reminds you that while Sandman would eventually become a sweeping narrative, it starts out as a horror book. It starts out as a pretty good horror book too. Finally, at number 1, we have the character that I would consider to be the scariest comic book villain of all time. The INVUNCHE from Swamp Thing, created by Alan Moore and Rick Veitch. And you know what? It might actually be pronounced INVUNCHE, maybe? I don't know, and I'm not going to go look it up because I want to spend as little time thinking about this character as possible. It's one of the most frightening things I have ever encountered in comics. Just the look of it is really disturbing. And the more that you look into it, the weirder it gets. Moore and Veitch based the INVUNCHE on a figure from Chilean mythology, and they did a pretty good job recreating it, and it's super, super creepy. Just the idea that it was once human, but that someone took a baby and sort of shaped it and stitched it up in terrible ways to create this thing. It'll stick with you. It'll scare you for a long time. Now, aside from the Joker, a lot of the characters on this list don't have a long history. Joker, of course, has been terrorizing people for about 75 years. The INVUNCHE only lasts about 10 issues, but those are 10 of the scariest issues I've ever read. and when it's terrorizing people to the point where they're committing suicide, well, you start to feel that terror yourself. That just about does it for my list of the top 5 scariest comic book villains of all time, but fear is subjective. So if you've got a villain that scared you, why not let us know in the comments at comicsalliance.com or hit me up on Twitter at the ISB. Thanks for listening, have a spooky week. We'll be back with another top 5 next time.